talk about the VOD and the silver screen. Kevin and Tom and Joe know all there is to know, from masterpieces to deep fried tacos. And if the movie sucks, you might hear them say, there's no telling where the guys will take you. Get ready for a spoiler. Won't say it twice, cause we already warned you. Better watch out, it's gonna ruin the plot. Real spoilers. Real spoilers. Real spoilers.
Broadcasting from the lush but not lavish studios, not located in the O'Keefe Institute for Advanced Film Snarkitude this week, because we're all on remote. It's Real Spoilers, episode 793, Kingdom of the Return of the Battle of the Planet of the Apes. Something like that. Yeah.
Perfect.
So, I guess let's go around the table. Kevin?
This is Kevin.
And this is Tom. And Joe is out this week, so joining us via the magic of Squadcast, which is what we use now, it's Shaurya Chawla. Hey, how's it going?
I'm good, guys. Thanks so much for having me back. It's been a while.
Thanks for doing this on such short notice, too. We were supposed to have a guest lined up, but he didn't realize I actually wanted him to see the movie.
Go figure.
So I was...
Well, Tom, you say short notice, but Shaurya knows I've given him some very short notices before.
This is actually an improvement? Oh,
yeah. What was the last time? Last time was, 10 minutes? 5 minutes?
I mean,
my apologies.
Well, when Joe doesn't show up, sometimes Joe has a work emergency or whatever, and he's a police officer. So, I'll be like, quick, Shaurya sees everything. Can you come on the show?
Awesome. Well, before we dig into the movie, let me knock out shameless plugs. Don't forget we're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, TuneIn, wherever you find a podcast. You can find us while you're there. Be sure and follow us so you never miss an episode. Maybe leave us a review. That's super helpful and greatly appreciated. You can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/real spoilers. While you're there, like the page and join the group. The group is called League of Show Sharers because we're hoping you will share an episode. It's just a really easy way to get our show in front of new people and maybe pick up some new listeners so we don't feel like we're wasting our time, or more importantly, so our wives don't feel like we're wasting our time.
That's what really matters.
Yes.
The most important part.
People who were kind enough to share an episode last week include librarian Cynthia Lane Levanway, Travis Tewitt, Chris Files, Ralph Tribble, Julianne Jordan, Glenn Cougar Mellon Brewer, Tom Dowdy, Richard Krotzer, Chris Magic Man, Jason McLean, Gabriel Lugo, Greg Sumners, Heather Sachs, Taylor Ward, Christopher Rex, Edit Photo Gamer, The Kryptonian Orphan, Cinema Recall, Invasion of the Remake, David Rojas, Inside the Crazy Ant Farm, that's a new one. Spoiler Piece Theater, Ronnie Castle, Colby Mack, In Session Film, Dissect That Film, Mike and Oscar, Geek to Me Radio, Nostalgia Cast, Binge Movies, Ryan Terry, and Matt Naglia. So The Fall Guy is what the episode that we did last week, which underperformed at the box office, but based on our show sharers, I think they make up the entirety of the box office. That was a lot of people.
I think our YouTube video has more views than the actual film itself.
Which is a shame because the movie was fun. Also, don't forget we have a YouTube channel at youtube.com/@theclipout. /@Real Spoilers.
It's so easy to remember, Tom.
I know, right? It rolls off the tongue. And then finally, don't forget our Patreon, patreon.com/Real Spoilers, where for $5 a month you get all sorts of bonus content. It's a great, inexpensive way to support the show, and we like you extra. So there's all that. Let's dig into Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes.
So Joe's not here to synopsisize,
so we will subject Kevin to that task.
Yeah, so I'll subject Wikipedia to that task. First of all, I think maybe we should give some first impressions on this movie. I really enjoyed this movie. I think this is one of my favorite movies I've seen all year. What did you guys think?
I thought this was really good. I thought it was a little slow at the beginning, but it was definitely putting things in place, so the slowness paid off, which makes the slowness better retroactively. But I was really worried because I know obviously a major change in creative teams, and I was concerned about how they would move the ball forward in this franchise, but I thought they did a wonderful job.
I really enjoyed the movie. Like I said, I thought it was a really fun time. I was skeptical at first as well because, the original team with like Matt Reeves, Andy Serkis, I really love what they did, especially with Dawn and War. I thought this was pretty good. I don't love it quite as much as those two movies, but I did enjoy it.
I would agree.
Yeah, I did enjoy myself. I thought that, like, in a lot of departments, it did a really, really good job.
I'm really hoping that, because I agree, like, I don't think it's as good as those last two, but I think it's probably better than Rise.
I think Rise gets a lot of flack, though, because the other two were so good, but I think people forget like everything that they laid the groundwork for, and it was a really good movie.
Agreed. I just rewatched all three of them, and my wife had never seen them, and so I was like, "Well, you should probably see these if we're going to go see the new one." And so, it's funny. Each one of them, she went into like, "I can't believe you're making me watch a Planet of the Apes movie," and then at the end, she was like, "Well, son of a bitch, that was that was really good." And so, I agree wholeheartedly. I just think the problem with Rise for most people is that you don't get as much about apes, right? It's laying the groundwork, and it's laying it well and interestingly. But yeah, I think if you're going to a Planet of the Apes movie, you want more Planet of the Ape style stuff. But
yeah,
this is also a franchise that never really truly had an origin movie. So going back to do an origin, I thought in this case made sense. It's not like Spider-Man giving us the fifth one or whatever, right? But,
right. The Rise of the Planet of the Apes is really like a Batman Begins. You're building the whole thing up. There's not a lot of Batman in Batman Begins. He's Batman towards the end of the movie, and it's the same thing that Rise does, but it sets it up really well. And like you guys said, that trilogy is great. But see, I think everyone went into this movie thinking, well, how can it ever live up to that trilogy? And so I honestly had tempered my expectations. And I loved this movie. I was engaged from beginning to end. I thought all the groundwork they laid, the character development, like I can see where you say, oh, it's a little slow, but to me, they built out this rich world. And although we were kind of introduced to it in the last trilogy, this is several hundred years later, and they're introducing you to how all these tribes are laid out now and these brand new characters. And so I found myself completely sucked into it and immersed like I would in a Lord of the Rings or Star Wars. Like I feel like the world building they do is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree wholeheartedly. Like I said, I think that the slowness at the beginning can kind of be forgiven retroactively because when you get to the end, you see that they are laying the groundwork for things. It isn't. They're not just spinning their wheels. It does have a payoff and a function that I didn't anticipate it having. Or that I was questioning if it would actually have.
Yeah, because to me, this is not a lesser than. I mean, those other last two films in that whole trilogy, they're phenomenal. But
yeah.
I personally, I liked this more than I did the third movie of that trilogy. I loved this movie, and I know that's going to be a unique opinion. I know that people hold that trilogy so dear, but honestly, like I went with Matt Reedy, friend of the show, and afterwards we both loved it, and I was like, I think this is better than the other ones, and he said the exact same thing. So I don't know.
I find it fascinating that the original Planet franchise, it's odd in that like that first one was a giant hit, the second one was almost as big of a hit, but like even though it kept making money for them, they kept slashing the budgets, forcing them to give us lesser and lesser films as the series progressed. Yeah, and like I think I've seen the first Planet of the Apes like 30 years ago, and I don't know that I've ever seen any of the other ones. And so I have no real nostalgia for this franchise. I've gone into every one of these Planet of the Apes movies until this one, low-key dreading it because it just seemed like kind of a dumb franchise to me. And so I didn't go in low-key dreading this one because I've been like, okay, those last three were really good. And so I think like you, Kevin, I had lower expectations, but I did have my hopes up, and they certainly met them.
Yeah, for sure. And what I think is really cool, too, is if you step back and look at the big picture. So they said now they're planning on making this 9 movies, 3 different sets of trilogies. And when you step back and think about it, and you know that original movie, Charlton Heston was like 2,000 years in the future because he was an astronaut and the time was different. So he comes back, and spoilers, it's Earth, but he comes back to it several thousand years later. So right now we've got the trilogy that started off with present day with the humans, and then the virus spreads and the apes rise and they become the dominant species. Humans are dumbed down. By the end of the last trilogy, the virus is making humans dumber. They're losing speech. It's wiping out most of them. And now we're a few hundred years later when this one picks up, and I have a feeling they're trying to make this 9-movie series end with Planet of the Apes. I think they're going to have it match up and remake the first one, would be my guess.
That seems to be what they're going with, because it would be generational gaps each time, because still we're about 1,700 years off that movie. So we're getting there. And I know they've changed a few things origin-wise, but I mean, if you look at the pattern of things, especially with Rise having that moment, where you see the space mission happening on the TV at one point, where it's mission, it's like I saw a comment someone gave me when I was talking about the movie as well, was like, oh, these are not connected to that. It's like, no, they're very much connected. It's just we're not near that point yet, so it's obviously going to be like,
Yeah, the first movie starts off 2,000 years in the future. So right now, these movies started off in present day. So you have at least 2,000 years to catch up to them. And again, I don't know if they'll actually remake it. I think it depends on how good the 9 movies are. But it's either going to end with the 9th one is right before the new one and they remake it, or they might have the 9th one be a remake of the original. But I feel like with all those little clues they planted, that it's going to go right up until Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, I don't think it's supposed to. You're not saying that you think it's going to tie up to where, and then those original movies are where we pick up, right? Like they're all one franchise.
I don't know yet. My guess is that they would remake the first one. So that you'd be 2,000 years in the future.
Yeah, because I don't think they can marry it to the original franchise. Because in the original franchise, I know that they go back in time, and you see you see like the humans are keeping apes as slaves, or is it vice versa? Like I think that they've already kind of written out some of those sequels if they tried to go that route.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's why I think that if they're good enough, if the series ends up being consistently good, I think that they'll either just end where it's like it could lead into the first one and disregard everything, or if they have the balls to do it. I mean, it's a famous movie, but it's not Citizen Kane.
Right.
You can remake Planet of the Apes. I mean, they've tried, but you can do it without people going like, oh my God, you can't remake Planet of the Apes. I think they've proven that rebooting the series with such good movies that, like, if we get a 9th or 10th one and it's like Planet of the Apes 2,000 years in the future, I'd be on board for it at this point.
I think this franchise has earned the right to remake Planet of the Apes.
Right.
Like they've been so consistently good. They're 4 for 4 now, and I think they've absolutely earned the right. And I don't think they can marry it back up to the old one, because those last 3 Planet of the Apes movies, it kind of becomes a civil rights allegory, which, while their hearts were in the right place, is maybe a tad problematic in terms of who the oppressed are supposed to be. That's maybe not the best metaphor using apes for civil rights. And so that doesn't seem to be the type of story they want to tell, a civil rights aspect sort of thing. It's more about human nature and power and what is considered civilized.
Yeah. Well, and so getting into this movie, so you've got basically the main character is Noah, and he and his 2 friends are going to have this ceremony. It's like some coming of age type of ceremony where they go out and they have to take 3 birds' eggs out of a nest and they bring them back and raise them. Noah's father is like the bird master for the tribe, and he has all these eagles that he sends out and track things for him and help them hunt and help them scout and all that good stuff. That night, a human breaks into the aviary and Noah is startled. His egg breaks, and so that obviously causes a big deal, because he's like, oh, my father's not gonna let this slide. I've got to go get this new egg. And so he ends up leaving.
The egg thing, I'm just curious, did your theater have a tangible reaction when that egg broke?
Yeah.
Like, I just thought it was fascinating, like, how quickly people were invested in this world. When that egg broke, like, everybody in the theater was like, oh, like they were like just audibly upset that his egg broke.
Right?
I found it fascinating.
It is interesting too when you think that people eat eggs all the time.
Well, I don't think I think it was more about what that egg. Like they knew he was supposed to protect that egg. It wasn't like, oh, the egg has been ruined. It was like whatever Noah's working on has been screwed up.
For sure. Well, but I agree with you. That's my point, is that like an egg by itself would not be a big deal, but you care about these characters.
Yeah.
And we should stop and say the CGI in this movie is incredible.
Yeah, I actually had a hard time figuring out whether it was CGI or not, because about 10 minutes in, I'm like, this is real, right? I mean, we're just watching a documentary here. Like, there's no way. And then you have to sort of remind yourself, like, oh, it's motion capture. Those are people. I was like, oh, what? Like, this is crazy.
Well, they do the thing like, this reminds me of, as much as that movie was kind of a stinker critically, but the Lion King remake. I mean, the Lion King movie was not a live action remake. It was a CG animated remake, and it looked so real. And this movie's the same way, where they're not out in the jungle. They're not motion capturing in a tree. You know what I mean? Like, this is CG. This world, for a lot of it, is CG. Not to say they didn't have any sets, but your brain, like, the CG is so good and the world looks so good that when you marry those two things together and you're watching an animated live action movie, it all works, right? Because it's not CG on a real world, it's CG in a CG world. So the frame rate's the same, everything moves the same, the lighting is all, it's the same lighting for the characters and the background, because they're all in the same computer program. So I think that the full CG sequences looked so good, but whenever they even put humans and apes together, the CG has gotten so good to where now it's not distracting. Like, think about 10 years ago when CG looked really good, but next to humans or on a set, you would just have that uncanny valley where it just took you out of it that much.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, apparently, I was reading up on this a little bit. So they did some stuff similar to, like, The Creator, and, like, they filmed real locations, and then they did CGI over that with the characters. So some of the sequences where you're seeing those big landscapes, that's actually, like, it's like, okay, that's on location. Like, we tried to do as much of it like that, and then we added the special effects over it, which I think is such a good approach, because I think it worked really well for The Creator, and I think you can see some of that over here too. And I don't think they used it for everything. Like, I don't think there's a isolated ape kingdom area in New Zealand. So, I think that really helped, because it's like you can, like, especially leading up to that whole sequence where they're being hunted, that whole sequence with the water and all that. It's like, I think there's a lot of that in there. I mean, the water looked way too real, because they used the Way of Water VFX people for this.
I was going to say, remember Avatar, The Way of Water? This is Fox. This is the same company.
Weta FX. They apparently they were like, hey, you guys worked on Way of Water. You guys got 2 minutes. So they worked on this too, and you can clearly
copy paste.
Yeah.
I think some of it. I think part of the reason the effects are so good, if you think about it, this movie has no stars. Honestly, this franchise, for the most part, doesn't have stars, right? Like, they can take the money that they would have spent getting a Chris Pratt or somebody, Robert Downey Jr. They can take that money and spend it all on special effects. Because if you think about it, the first one's James Franco, pre-controversy, but he's not a super expensive actor for a movie like this.
He was pretty big at that time,
but I don't think he was making like bank. Like,
he was coming off Spider-Man, remember?
But nobody went to see Spider-Man because of James Franco, like, right? Like, so, like, I'm not saying he didn't get a paycheck.
But I'm sorry, I interrupt. He also got a Best Actor nomination that time for 127 Hours.
Yeah.
So he was riding off that high. Sorry, go on.
But it's not Tom Cruise. I get what you mean. It's not Robert Downey Jr. plus Iron Man. So, but you're right. I mean, they put the actors in. They put good actors in. You had Woody Harrelson in the last one. You had Gary Oldman in the middle one. So they anchor it with, like, there's a famous actor. I mean, this has William H. Macy, not an A-list star, but a known actor and a very good actor. So they put them in these movies, but you're right. They don't have the leading actors. Like, as good as Kevin Durand is, Kevin Durand plays Proximus, the villain of this film, and he's fantastic. He was great in Abigail. Like, he's really fun in anything he shows up in, but Kevin Durand isn't like, okay, now Tom Cruise is the villain of the movie, right? It's just a different level.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you always see at least one face actor that you recognize, maybe even know their name, but isn't necessarily a guy who opens a movie. I think the closest they would have gotten to that is James Franco. And I love Woody Harrelson, but I don't know that like people are like, let's go see the new Woody Harrelson movie in the same way they are, let's go see the new Tom Hanks movie.
Right, for sure. No, that makes sense. But yeah, the VFX are incredible in this film. We've said this over the last couple of years, but it's a fairly new thing to where you're like, the CG is so good, it didn't take me out of it. They've now gotten to that point. One, our brains are used to it, but it's gotten so good to where I think now it's not a distraction, where it used to be like, oh, the CG's so distracting. And to Shaurya's point, the blend of practical effects and CG really hits that sweet spot because you do have a grounded anchor point to where you're like, that's real, and the CG is so good and does not take away from it. So it looks phenomenal. But anyway, back to the movie. Noah is out trying to get the bird's egg. While he's out, he sees a bunch of dead apes on this walkway, and they're in some kind of like a strange masks and armor. It's a different tribe than his. And then he sees one of the elders from his tribe that has a knife in his back. And so clearly there's some bad stuff going down. And we see the bad guys, which end up being Proximus's group of apes, are coming in and ransacking the place. And they're searching for this human. And so come to find out, it's that human that snuck into the aviary earlier. And of course, Noah's like, well, I got to warn the village. I got to go. So he ends up getting back to the village, but the village is on fire. His family has all been taken captive. And the last thing he does is he climbs up into the aviary to find his father, who is trying to rescue the eggs and get the eagles out to safety. And what is the name of the bad guy? So there's like Proximus's main guard is constantly tracking him down in this movie.
Is that Silva?
It was
I think
Silva. It was Silva.
Yeah.
Silva? Okay.
Yeah.
Is he played by anyone that we know?
Eka Darville?
I do know who that is. If you guys have seen Jessica Jones, he's her neighbor. He's the yeah.
Okay. Silva is the big bad lieutenant of Proximus, who we see until we finally get to Proximus's people. So Silva and Noah and his father are up in this treetop aviary, and there's a big showdown. Noah tries to save his father. He can't. He's basically thrown out of there, hanging by a branch, and he sees his father killed by Silva, and he falls to what seems to be his death. Now, that does not be the case, but they left him for dead, and basically his tribe is all kidnapped and brought back to Proximus's camp, and Noah goes on this journey to get back his family, his two friends from the beginning, his mother, who is still alive, and he basically goes to save his people. And I just really liked how this movie is a quieter movie. It's not a nonstop action-packed movie. There are moments of action, but I do kind of love that he's kind of like the last of his kind. He's the last of his people, trying to go back and find them and rescue them. And I don't know, there was something just really cool about that idea of him going on this quest, which made me feel like a Lord of the Rings, right? Like they're on this journey to go to dump the ring in the volcano, or, Star Wars with Luke Skywalker. It very much felt like this epic journey, and had a really good score too. So the whole thing felt very epic in scope to me.
Mm-hmm. Actually, the whole thing which he has with eventually he meets that orangutan Raka. The whole thing. When you mentioned Luke Skywalker, it reminded me like there was a Luke Obi-Wan dynamic between them, and that he was like, oh, I know so much about the world. It's like, you don't know anything. And then you kind of start to explore.
And teaching him of Caesar's teaching, which is kind of like teaching him the Force. I mean, this movie, those movies that we mentioned, of course, are all based on the hero's journey, whether it's Lord of the Rings or Star Wars. It's that same kind of classic storytelling technique, but there's a reason why they use it, and it really, we've been programmed kind of in our brains. We've seen so many epic stories, Harry Potter, that go on this same journey, and so again, this movie fits right into those, to where you feel like you're watching this grand story about some bigger thing, and also with the help of the last three movies that have gone from basically just humans and these experiments with apes and this virus that now have taken over the entire world. There's such a big scope, and this movie really, I like that they leaned onto the quieter side though for this one. But yeah, he goes along his journey. He meets Raka, who there are some really good comedic moments. He's basically the last of his order of, like, he's been keeping these books and trying to keep the history and the teachings of Caesar alive. And this movie basically is a big commentary on religion. It has a lot to say about people taking teachings, much like people do with the Bible, and then manipulating them and using them to wage wars and to kill people. And Proximus and Silva, they're all the bad guys in this movie are all for Caesar. This is for Caesar. But Caesar, as you know from those last movies, and for people that haven't watched it, Caesar's whole thing was that apes don't kill apes. He does not want war, and he really didn't want to fight the humans unless they were trying to hurt them. But Caesar's whole thing was living in peace and the collective and protecting one another. And so now that Caesar's gone, these people are using his name to wage these wars. And so I really thought that was an interesting and a relevant message for just the world in general and how people use religion for control.
Oh, for sure. A subtler thing that I took away from this. So the orangutan's name is Raka, and a few years...
Raka Khan?
Yeah, Raka Khan. Yeah. So a few months ago... there was a story about an orangutan named Rackus, and I mean, I guess this must be a coincidence because these are so close together. This story is from May 3rd, and it's in Rackus. Apologies to the orangutan community for mispronouncing that if I did, but he's the first time they've seen an animal use medicine to heal itself.
Oh, wow.
Like they've had a theory that some of like the chimps knew how to do that, but this is the first time that they've seen one. They actually witnessed him do it. He chewed up some leaves that like different tribes people know have medicinal purposes and like put them on a wound or something. And
see, this is why this movie made more money than The Fall Guy. This is the viral marketing that these movies need.
Yeah, that's
synergy.
But I just thought it was interesting that the names were so similar, almost like it was a generational name that had been passed down. And like I remembered the story, and I went and looked it up because I was like, "Is that purposeful?" But based on when the story broke, I don't know how it could be. Like it's just a fun coincidence.
Be coincidence.
Yeah,
but I wonder if they named some of the characters. I wonder if that is a famous orangutan name that has been passed down or play on it. You gotta wonder.
I actually saw this at a press screening, so no major audible audience, unfortunately, for me.
Right.
It was a very full press screening. But I do remember at least my reaction. Like, it was not so much to the egg thing. Like, of course, when I saw the egg break, I was like, man. But the part that really got me was that, in the last two movies, especially in War, when you're first, sort of introduced to Caesar and you see how people have been following him, there's this, I think it's the music when it plays, it's like there's, heroic, like inspirational theme, which Giacchino had for him. It's like this hero walks among us. And in this movie, when they're charging in at one point, and they're taking down the Eagle clan, and you have this one kill, and then Silva, I guess, goes for Caesar. The theme is not here; it's like this evil, horrifying theme. I remember that was the moment that played. I'm like, ah, damn it! Like they took his, they took his teachings and they've twisted it into what it is. That's the moment where it really hit, and I love how they did that. And even later on when it's like, remember his words, and it's like apes together strong, and it's again that evil theme kicks in. It's like, damn it, this is obviously not what you know, and it's just really well played, like how they played that angle of it.
Exactly.
I thought the time jump was really smart in that if you haven't seen the first three, it still works for you. If you've seen the first three and you love them and you've revisited them multiple times, it absolutely works for you. And if you've seen the first three, but you only have a vague recollection, that's okay, because so do the characters in this movie, right? They only have a vague recollection of the history because it can only be passed down orally. So the fact that it has become this game of telephone and the message and story has been corrupted and mutated, it also is in this odd way kind of makes the original Planet of the Apes still maybe viable in that occurred, but like it's been corrupted through the retelling. And so I found that angle on it smart and effective and fascinating. And this movie does something that I really love when a movie can pull off, which is I understand why everyone is doing what they're doing. Like, even if I don't agree, I would argue that, like, while there's a lot of conflict in this movie, I find a hard time finding a true villain because they've all got a point, you know, like, and that
those are the best villains.
Yeah. And it's like, and, you know, Maximus is just trying to do what's best for his, it's weird to say people, but his people, right? And
yeah, Proximus.
Yeah. And so it benefits him, but if he can get in there and get this information, it would also benefit the other apes around him. And so, like, I get it.
Well, and by the end of the movie, I mean, not to jump all the way ahead, but by the end of the movie, it makes even more sense when you see what's going on in the human world and what the apes are trying to do to protect the apes. It's like, well, yeah, they got a point here. And I do love that theme throughout the movie of history repeating itself. And like you said, enough years have passed where things are muddy and people don't really understand why they're doing things anymore. And the leaders are saying we do this because of this, but really that's so different than what it was 300 years ago. But yeah, it all plays really well. So anyway, to get back into the movie, though, so he meets Raka. They become friends. They see a human, and it's the same human girl from the aviary, and they call them echoes. Do you guys know why the apes call them echoes? I didn't quite catch that.
I don't remember a specific reason for it. I don't know. Maybe it's because... No, that can't be it, because they don't have sound. So I don't...
I don't think they ever explain it, but I'm sure there's an in-universe reason, and I didn't quite pick up on it because they don't talk, so maybe people are just the apes, they talk, and their voice just echoes back to them because there's no other sound coming back at them. There's got to be some reason like that, but they don't actually echo anything. The humans at this point, as we saw in the movie with Woody Harrelson's character, they're like de-evolving. The virus has made them dumber. They're losing their speech. And so all the humans, at least that we see in the beginning of this movie, they cannot speak. And so Noah and Raka presume, of course, that any human they've ran across can't talk. And Raka says they did at one point, and these books have these symbols. Those are actually words, and there is a way to teach them again. But Noah has lived in a world his whole life where, of course, these echoes, they don't talk. And to him, it's bewildering that a human could actually speak like the apes do. You know, the apes, the superior species. And so there's kind of this through point where he's like having his eyes open to what the humans once were, and we eventually find that this echo can speak, but she's playing it cool. She's trying to be safe and not, showing her hand at this point.
Couple things. When she speaks, I thought that was a great flip from the first movie when Caesar says no and everybody's like, what the hell? And when she does it, when she does it and like all the apes have the exact same reaction, I love the way they flipped the script on that moment. I thought that was brilliant. Also, I disagree that she's playing it safe. Like, she's on a spy mission. Like, she's not good. Like, she's, or at least not good for apes. Like, she is on a flat out spy mission for people. And this chick is full of from the get. And now you don't know that until the very end of the movie, but like her whole story is BS. I think. Because she talks about how she was raised in silence, and it's funny because I spent the movie until the end, I spent the movie thinking, like, if you're raised in silence to hide the fact that you can talk, that would have the same effect as not being able to talk, right? Like, you only develop language skills by using language. You mimic sounds, you interact with the other people who use those same sounds to communicate, and that's how you learn language. And if she was raised in silence, well, the end effect of that would be no different than not ever having the ability to speak. And so I spent a good chunk of the movie being like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, that's dumb. And then I get to the end, I was like, oh, it's not dumb. She's lying. Like, she's flat out lying to them about who she is and where she's from.
Yeah. I'm on board with that. I agree. I didn't mean play it safe necessarily, but I was saying playing it cool. Like she can't give it up that she can talk. So
right.
She has to pretend not to until she has to, because the bad guys are about to abduct her. So what happens is Noah basically goes to drop her off. They find a bunch of other echoes that are at the water. They're drinking. There's zebras they've never seen before, which was a really funny moment.
Yeah.
Because these apes ride horses, and their jaws are dropping, and they're like horses with stripes, and it was so funny. But they're about to drop her off, but then Proximus and the bad guys, Silva and his crew, come, and they are there trying to get this girl. And instead of leaving, Noah begins to care for her, and he's obviously a good ape, and he cares about what happens to her, and so he goes back to rescue her. She yells out Noah. There's a really cool visual of this cornfield that is like, not corn, what is it, wheat or something? They're in some long field that, and overhead you can see her crawling through it, and you can see all the apes coming from different directions, and really neat. But Silva finds her, and she yells Noah, and he charges back with his horse, scoops her up right in the nick of time. Silva's like hanging off there, but Noah kicks him, and they ride off. So they're now on this journey together, and like Tom said, I mean, we don't really know what's up with her, but this whole movie until the very end, you think that she cares for Noah, and that, they're somehow going to live in harmony. The long story short of it is the camp where Proximus is and all of Noah's clan is being held has this bunker that was from the military. Spoilers, there's tanks in there, there's guns in there, there's weapons, and she plays it off to Noah like, oh, there's a book in there that will help humans to speak, because he doesn't even know that's a possibility. And she's like, yes, but we need this book to teach them. And I do think that was kind of a cool reveal, where it's not a book, but it's a communications device is what she's actually after, and that will allow the humans to speak to one another throughout the world. So I thought that was good writing, the fact that she wasn't completely lying, but her purposes were nefarious,
Yeah.
So they go to a bridge. They start trying to cross it. At this point, Proximus is caught up with them and like flanks them. There's apes under the bridge on the other side. They're surrounded. There's a fight here, and Raka ends up to save the girl who has fallen in the water. He puts her back up, but then he's like hanging by a net off the side, and Proximus comes up and takes his knife and cuts the net, sends him off over the waterfall. I really thought that we were going to see him in some grand, like, saving them later.
Me
and
too.
I still don't think he's dead. I think they're saving that because he's such a good character, an enjoyable character. You see him go off in the water, and I get how they can't really swim, but you know what I mean? He can grab a branch. He can go off the waterfall and cling on to something. I mean, it's very believable. I think that in the next movie or two, he can swoop in and save the day, right? Because, you've forgotten about him. He's as good as dead.
Rule number one of movies, unless you see a body, character's not dead.
Yep. 100%. And so the only reason I think, and in most movies, if you do not see a character die, if you don't see it, it's so they can bring him back. It's just, most people will think he's dead. And when he saves the day, you're going to be like, oh my God, I forgot about him. I didn't even think he was alive. But anyway, he was a great character. I do hope he comes back. I think that'd be awesome. They get to the camp. It didn't seem like a redo necessarily, but in the last movie, weren't the apes like all Caesar's people enslaved kind of in Woody Harrelson's camp? I guess the humans were enslaving them was the difference, but we kind of went back to a similar thing where now Proximus has, I mean, would you call it enslaved? I mean, they weren't necessarily like in a chain gang, but like, they were doing work. They were trying to get into this building.
They were certainly using the apes as animals, livestock. Yeah, like they were helping them load weapons. I think they were doing that in the second one too, because isn't that the scene where like the ape comes in and he's like acting all goofy, and then he grabs the machine gun and kills them both, and then
that's Koba.
Yeah,
Koba should be in every movie.
What's that?
Koba should be in every movie.
Yeah.
I thought it was.
You're not online enough, Tom.
No,
Yeah.
there's a very specific thing over there. Anyway, sorry. Go.
I thought it was interesting, like that, and at the end of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, the end credits, you hear like a chimp making a noise that everybody thought was supposed to mean Koba was still alive, but then you never see him again. But anyway, like he's become maybe not a slave, but for all practical intents and purposes, he's given up. He's like the humans have lost, and I'm going to do what I can to make my life as easy as possible.
Yeah, so one thing that like I kept watching for the turn, like, and to Tom's point, Proximus isn't necessarily like an evil villain. I mean, he does have nefarious things. He is doing things to protect himself and to keep himself in power. But again, he doesn't necessarily treat the apes bad. Like the apes that he took from their tribe, he brings them in, but it's because he wants to rule over this like one people. He wants all the apes to be together, but you don't see the bad general apes like whipping the other apes. You don't see them kicking them or like get back to work and you shouldn't go kill people and abduct them from their tribes. But he's also not like mistreating them. He's kind of trying to convert them. Like, I want you to be my follower. I want you to join my thing.
I also kind of feel like when you view his actions through the prism of history, it's kind of the evolution of man, societally speaking, right? Like, it's a form of imperialism, right? He's going out and grabbing these other tribes and we've seen humans do that throughout history. And it's like each level of civilization is hopefully a little bit more civilized than the last, where at some point we look back on that and go, well, that was not cool. But also we're maybe not all of us, but many of us are benefiting from decisions like that were made hundreds or thousands of years ago. And so it's easy to look at with a modern perspective and be like, oh, that's not cool. But when you live in this world and your options are that limited, this might be the best, worst choice you're presented with.
Yeah, I was actually thinking of the scene where, he's on the table and he's talking to Noah about what he's planning on doing, especially when it comes to, have you heard of evolution? And it's like, the idea of humans used to run things first, and now it's our time. So we should be able to, and it's very easy to see how anyone would get swayed by that. You're hearing that speech, and you can see Noah also like letting his guard down a bit while he's talking. You're like, oh, you kind of got a point, actually. Like, I mean, like when you really think about it, because you sort of, I mean, very much like a cult thing. It's like, I don't want to mistreat you guys. I just want you to join my side. It's like, believe in what I'm saying, and we'll all work out. Everything's gonna be fine. So that's
That's a really good comparison as like a cult leader,
and
like
also
offering protection and
Also, I think I was going to say, I think the only reason we're rooting for the people sometimes is because we're people.
Yeah, right.
Like if we weren't people, we might view this movie totally differently.
Well, that's 100% correct, and I think you do have to take a step back. And yes, of course, it's that self-survival. We want the humans to win because we would want to be alive and to be able to talk and to rule and, not be stuck in cages. But it's like, if the shoe's on the other foot, if you look at this, we're finding out, and the apes are finding out that they were kept in cages at once. Like Noah and his people think they are, because they are the superior species at this point. But as far as they know, it's always been like that. And when they see these pictures, when they do eventually, when the human leads them into the silo or whatever this is, the military base, and they get to these books, and you're seeing all these animals at the zoo. It's a book about like a day at the zoo, and this little kid is at the zoo seeing all the animals, and they flip through these pages and get to the apes, and he sees, which I can't remember who it was, but someone had mentioned something earlier. It might have even been Rocca, but someone tells him like they used to, you wouldn't believe it, apes lived among humans actually at one point, and the apes were in cages. And so he sees this, and it really hits home, him seeing this this drawn picture of this, though, that's like, wow, he was telling the truth. This really happened. And so Noah has now the self-preservation where he thinks that's not even a possibility, but he sees at one point it was, and he doesn't want to go back to that. So it's survival of the fittest. He wants to keep the apes safe, and the humans are fighting for the same thing. And it's a really interesting question, because it's like, is it right to keep these apes in cages? Well, no. And I think a lot of people would argue they should be free, not in zoos. But then it's also like, well, but it's not right to keep humans in cages, right? Like apes shouldn't rule over humans. And so there's this through line of like, one person should not be enslaving the other. One person should not be keeping the cages in the other. It's like we should live together, but history repeats itself. And out of fear, each side, each group, no matter who they are, wants to be the ones in power to protect themselves. And it's just this never ending struggle throughout history.
Yeah. Yeah. And that way, I think it's what's smart is like they play it sort of on an even ground, where it's like because Raka is the one who actually says that whole speech about apes and humans living together. And when he's talking about that, he's also talking about Caesar's teachings. And you see Noah sort of, look at Proximus at first and like, oh, Raka was right about you, and you are twisting those words. But then you kind of, when he sees the book too, and then eventually when it comes towards the ending of the movie, it's like, you kind of also see him sort of be like, okay, but also he's got a point. So it's like there's two different perspectives that are at play during that entire final act, and you kind of see both sides of that story, which is a complex line to play.
Yeah.
Especially when you're dealing with a cult leader who has basically, every morning you'll just walk in and be like, what a wonderful day, and everyone will start chanting, that, and everyone just sort of gets in on that. By the way, if you walked out of the movie chanting that,
you missed the point. Is what happened.
Yeah.
Like I walked out. My friend, he was like, how was the movie? I was like, what a wonderful day. I was like, that's not. What did you do? Like that's. But I like that balance that the movie sort of plays around with, especially with those character motivations. And it makes sense because you have to like. I think it's sort of like. The best comparison I'll make to a recent thing is like, have you guys seen the Fallout TV show that came out recently?
Yeah.
I just finished the second episode.
Okay, so I'm not going to spoil too much, but like even from the second episode, you can kind of tell. It's like Lucy, she's not been out. So everything to her is new. And so, everything seems like, she's trying to sort of navigate certain things. So everything is like, there's no good or evil to her. It's like, I'm going to help this person. I'm going to talk to this person. You're kind of going like, no, don't talk to that person. No, don't do this because that's not going to work out well for you. And I feel like the same thing with Noah. It's like you haven't been outside your clan much, man. You haven't been down that tunnel. You don't know how everything works. So for him, all the points to some degree make sense. It's like, he's listening to all the points of view, and he's like, I don't want apes to be back in cages, but also I don't want apes to be cult members, but also I don't want the humans to succeed, but also I don't want them to die because it's like they also want to just survive. It's like it's so complicated, all of those things going on in his head, and I don't know. I really like how they handled that.
The great thing about Noah is, and why he does make a good leader, is that he's pure. He is a good ape. He's lived in his clan his whole life. At peace. They don't go to war. They don't hurt each other. He didn't know about humans, but when he does meet humans, he hasn't been brainwashed by Proximus or other religious cult members. He isn't sure of the humans, but he doesn't want to go kill them. He doesn't want to go take them all out. And he eventually befriends this human, and to his own detriment at the end of the day, because spoilers, like Tom said, she's up to no good. And like we said, Proximus has his reasons, but at the end of the day, he wants the apes to rule, and he'll take out anyone that gets in his way. Well, the humans and May is her name, we find out, and she wants to go in and steal this communication device that will allow them to connect with other humans around the world and, basically take back control and make humans the superior species. So they've all got their own interests at heart, and I feel like Noah, he is the purist, where he is just trying to help people, apes, it doesn't matter. He's a good ape, and I really like that character a lot. Basically, rushing to the end of the movie, Proximus is trying to get in this vault. He wants whatever's in there. He knows that the humans at one point in time ruled over civilization, and he knows that whatever's in that vault is going to let him do it. We see when they get in there, there's tanks, there's guns, there's all sorts of stuff. May steals this communications, like this satellite device, takes it with her. They get down to the bottom level, and Noah's like, will water damage whatever's in there? Earlier he plants this idea of, will water take it out? And so they have set up charges and explosives with the help of their two friends from the beginning of the movie. They've gone and taken all these explosives, put them around the dam. And their plan is, once they get in and get this book that she needs, quote unquote book, they're going to blow the place and take away everything from Proximus. And so they open the big doors, the vault doors. This very much reminded me of Fallout because I just watched that too. But they open the doors and there's Proximus with all of Noah's people, and he's brought them right down there into danger. So if he knows if they blow the dam, not only will it take out all these weapons and everything, but it's going to take out and kill all of his people because they do not swim. So Proximus has him there surrounded. They take Noah, the girl that he's interested in, his friend from the beginning. But then May whips out like a revolver, and they have never seen a weapon like that. And she ends up shooting the person that is holding Noah's friend. Okay, we got to say Kevin Durand as Proximus is amazing. He's really funny, really convincing as a leader, but he has lots of moments of levity. And he goes, after she shoots the guy, he's like, "I'll let you go, but just one question. Are there more of those in there?" And the way he delivers that line, I think, is hilarious. He's so funny. This is the big guy from Abigail. If you've seen Abigail, same guy. And he was in an X-Men movie, and, he's been around. He was in Lost. I know you guys have both seen Lost, right?
Name the X-Men movie.
So,
go ahead. You know which one.
Yeah, it's Wolverine Origins,
there
right?
You go.
Yeah. That's why I just say an X-Men movie. We don't.
That's why I was like, come on.
But he's always. Yeah.
That one's not his fault, though.
It's
No,
not. It's not.
he's always good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's always good. So,
So,
but this is the moment. This is when you really find out, if you didn't expect it yet, this is where you find out May is really bad, because she doesn't care if it's going to wipe out. Like, she's been on this whole journey. Noah saved her life countless time. They've been quote unquote friends throughout this whole thing. And she is basically like, nope, we got to take these guys out. And so she blows the dam. The whole thing comes crashing down into this vault, and Noah's like, climb. And so they all climb up and they follow him. There's a big battle. Silva's there, and Silva and Noah have a really good fight. He ends up trapping Silva like underneath some pipes, and as the water rises, he gets stuck there. This big battle, really, really good action scene.
I liked how Silva gets stuck because Noah flips the script and Noah makes his size an advantage. Like, up till now, Silva wins because he's bigger, and now Silva loses because he's bigger.
Yeah, that is really good. And the special effects, I just want to say again, the lighting and the water, because at this point there's water crashing in and everyone is getting in the water or getting splashed with the water. And you can see all the hair on these apes, and that it's wet and going in different directions. It's phenomenal what they do with the lighting and the water and everything. But anyway, all our good guys, pretty much, Noah's clan, all gets up to the top. And then here comes Proximus. So he has Noah dead to rights, and he's kicking him, and he wants him to like kneel to him. He wants to show all the other apes like Noah bowing down to him. And then this whole movie, Noah has not had control over these eagles. All this stuff in the beginning, like Tom mentioned, all this kind of slower building up pays off in the end. So Noah's father is this bird master, but Noah has never quite gotten it. And not until the very end of the movie, when they're right in front of the vault, does Noah finally like do the right thing and get his strength and courage, and the eagle lands on his hand. So at this point, all these eagles are circling above, and Noah is able to call down this main eagle, and all the other eagles come in. They start pecking away and clawing at Proximus, and they end up sending him over the edge of this vault, crashing down to the very bottom. And Noah becomes the leader. He ends up basically being the new leader of the clan and of all these apes.
But then you see May go back to her place of origin.
Yeah, and we see what really has been going on with the humans. They have a whole military base. They've been trying to get their satellites up. So they've got this underground bunker, and they've got like these like safety like hazard suits and decontaminations, because you got to remember that this virus is spread and taking out all these humans. And these humans have obviously been able to keep safe from it. They're very careful with being contaminated and everything. And she ends up bringing them this satellite device. And the woman she hands it to puts it into the computer. The satellites, the huge satellite dishes all align. And they finally say, like, I can't remember where they said they are, but some different.
I think it was Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. Okay, so there's people far away that now their communications are up. They hear them. They're like, good to hear from you. And so the humans are now able to kind of plan their attack and find others that are like them. And their goal is to rebuild humanity and take out the apes. Whoever stands in their way, they want to be the dominant species. So we find out that was really May's plan all along. Obviously, she does the flooding and everything, which was bad. So the last scene of the movie is Noah has gone back home. Like he says after he beats Proximus, I'm ready to go home. They're rebuilding things there. You see they're like rebuilding the aviary and all the towers and everything. And then May shows up, and May has like this flowing poncho thing, and she comes up to talk to him. They cut to behind May, and she's got a gun behind her back. So again, May's going to do whatever it takes, whatever she needs to do.
Yeah, she was more than prepared to kill Noah if it came to that.
Absolutely. And so
Like,
she's got this
they're
gun
sort of
behind her.
sort of weighing his words. It's like, what are you about to say? Are you going to say that you're coming after me, or are you going to let me go? Depending on how this is going to play out. And yeah, I like the way that they handle that. Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, it's a good scene. And again, it shows that humans, I think this is very relevant, that humans will do whatever it takes to stay in power. And the whole movie, if you think about it, going back to even the first scene, like all the cities have been overgrown. There's no pollution. There's no buildings that are, they're not demolishing forests to build buildings and everything. Everything's overgrown, and it's beautiful, and nature and everything. And humans do ruin a lot of the world. And so you see what the world is like without the human interference. And then come fast forward to the end of the movie, and you see May and her people are willing to do whatever it takes to come back into power and kill whoever it takes. Doesn't matter. And it's like history repeats itself. No matter what, these humans are not going to stop until they're back, which does bring up the question, like you guys said earlier. It's like, well, we're humans, of course, like we want humans to exist, but are they really the good guys? Like, just because we are humans, look how many bad things the humans are doing. So it's a movie that makes you think. And, it has good action and everything, but this movie is deep, and there's a lot of meaning and symbolism to it. And I think it's just a fantastic experience from beginning to end.
Agreed. I took the people that they show us at the end as being like some of them were resistant to this virus, like May was, which is why they could send her out into the world, but most of them weren't. Which is why
that's what I figured.
The person who opens the door is wearing a hazmat suit, and I gotta assume they're setting up the villain for the next movie too, which is what are these people going to do, especially now that they can talk to other people? Like that's going to be dangerous. I had a few like quibbles. It's the kind of quibbles that you tend to gloss over when you like the rest of it, but like when they find the abandoned military structure that Proximus is going after, when they fire it back up, I'm like, where are they getting the power for this? Like, where is this power source? I
wonder if the dam, it might have been hydroelectric, 'cause that's why it was built right off the water.
That's kind of what I
that'd be my guess.
I guess I would have liked some acknowledgement of like, where are they getting any power?
You're right. It would have been nice to see like some kind of turbine or whatever going, just to show like, oh, that's what's going on. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I really like this. This is really good, and like it's one of those movies where the further I get away from it, the more I like it.
Yeah, there's a lot to think about. I agree. Like I came out of it loving it, and I've been thinking about it for the past few days. I think it's fantastic. It looks great. Wes Ball is the director. I think he did a phenomenal job with this. Each of these new rebooted Apes movies has a different director, where you're like, oh, how can they outdo the last guy? And you have people like Matt Reeves coming in, and you're just like, well, I don't know, is the new guy going to do it? And this is the guy that directed the Maze Runner movies. I'm not saying they were terrible or anything, but they were what they were, and I never really was like excited, like, oh, the Maze Runner guy is gonna make the next Planet of the Apes movie. But I guess kind of post-apocalyptic, he had his hand in that world, like, weird society is fallen and things are a little bit weird, so I guess it makes sense, and he knocked it out of the park with this one. But you're coming off the heels of Matt Reeves, who is obviously an incredible filmmaker. He's made so many good movies, and most recently the Batman.
They were lucky to fall into a director of that quality. They were fortunate to get him to do two of those movies, because he did one and it was obvious that he was destined for better things. And I hate to say that because these movies have been good. But it's just like, he's not a director that wants to spend the rest of his life making Planet of the Apes movies, though. And so we were lucky to get him for two.
Definitely. Shaurya, any final thoughts from you on this one?
Nothing more that both of you have said. And this is one of those unfortunate cases where, again, I'm doing this after I've already reviewed this movie. So there's not much more I can add to it. My one quibble is just that I wanted more with Proximus screen time, like really. I think he had 2-3 big scenes, and that's about it. I was like yeah, I gotta love to see more of him. But beyond that, I didn't really have too many issues with it. I thought that the slow burn worked really well. I'm excited to see where they go with it. It's so funny because if they're connecting this to the original one, then you know how this turns out, and yet it's directed so well. These prequel, remake, reboot, whatever you want to call them. Is that even now you're like, oh, what's going to happen? Even though you know what's about to happen, you're so curious to see what it's going to build into, which is so great about it. And I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen next. I wasn't very worried about Westball getting the special effects right because I think with the Maze Runner movies, he did an outstanding job in terms of visuals. So I have no issues over there.
With a much lower budget.
Yes, with a much lower budget, but he made that work really, really well.
Yeah.
And I think he did an outstanding job with those. So I think he brought that flair to this, and I'm excited to see what he's going to do next. I hope he comes back for the next one.
I hope he does too. I think this was a really good setup for the next two.
My last question I have for you guys is, what do you think they saw in the telescope? Where do you think they're heading next?
I gotta think maybe they saw the ship of with the astronauts that that we know land to kind of rediscover the planet.
That will be interesting to see, because I wasn't sure if they saw another planet, like if they're going to try to go to space and go to a different planet, or if it is.
God, I hope they don't try to go to space. That sounds dumb.
Yeah, well, I know. I mean,
I don't need apes in space. That sounds dumb. Like
I know, but they've surprised us with stuff before.
They
I get
have,
what you're saying,
but
because you get corny sci-fi stuff that
sure.
go to Mars or whatever. But Westball leaves it purposefully vague.
Yeah,
he doesn't tell us what they saw. But yeah, I'd like to think that it was a spaceship as well. And it'll be interesting to see how they connect all that.
Awesome. Well, I guess that's it for this one. Let's go around the table and everyone can say where to find them.
This is Kevin. Follow me on Twitter at KevinRBrackett.
And Shaurya, where can they find your stuff?
You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on most social medias. It's just Shaurya Chawla. That's my name. Keep it in easy.
Awesome. And you can find me on Twitter at Roger Kubert or on Facebook at facebook.com/Tom O'Keefe. Thanks for tuning in. And don't forget to check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Real Spoilers. So that's it for this one. Thanks for tuning in. And until next time, Virgil flies the plane to freedom.
Get ready for a spoiler. Won't say it twice, 'cause we already warned you.